Hello everyone, and welcome back to Spearman Studios. Today we're not going to talk about Back to the Future or anything like that. No, we're going to talk about something that's new. And what's new is on Netflix, we have a brand new animated series called The Midnight Gospel, and is produced by Pendleton Ward, who you may know from Adventure Time as the lead showrunner for a few seasons. It is a story about Clancy, a multi-dimensional, multiversal podcaster who goes around to various planets, various multi-dimensional Earths, to talk about certain things on his spacecast, or his podcast, as it were. And each of these Earths that he goes to is on the brink of apocalypse. And this show, I have to say it's one of my favorite shows of the 2020s right now. I mean, granted, what else is there? I mean, this is definitely the start of the 2020s. What other shows could there be out there? But there's a lot that goes into a show like The Midnight Gospel, and looking into doing some research for myself on the making of this particular show, it's fairly interesting because each and every episode is pretty much modeled like a podcast. Sure, you get a little bit of like intro before they lead into the podcast itself, but the podcast, every time that they go to, or the Clancy goes to a brand new place to interview someone, it's always very calming. And that's the sort of thing that I praise first and foremost about this show, is that the show is able to balance this sort of smooth, sort of gentle discussion about certain things like meditation or existentialism or nihilism, religion, philosophy, whatever it is, in the face of something that is very apocalyptic or even disturbing in the background. The very essence of the fact that they're talking about various subjects in the face of destruction is oddly very beautiful and calming, which is not necessarily an effect you see in a lot of other pieces of media. But going into how this show was made, according to various sources, this is basically an animated adaptation of various podcast episodes of the Duncan Family Hour, which is a podcast that talks regularly about philosophy and religion and a lot of other different topics to discuss. And apparently Pendleton Ward, while working on Adventure Time, stumbled across said podcast and said, hey, you want to make an animated version of this podcast? And so they worked together. The creator of the podcast and the creator of Adventure Time came up with various pilots and whatnot to try to sell to other services, and they wound it up with Netflix in 2019, and here we are. And what I especially like about this show is that you can't really tell much about where the podcast begins and where the podcast ends. And the fact that certain parts are actually lifted directly from episodes of the podcast itself to be put into the show is very interesting, and also leads to some very emotional bits of storytelling too. Not just on the level of where Clancy is in terms of his character development, but also of who Duncan is, the creator of the podcast, where he was in his life in certain moments, especially in the final episode of the season, which I'm not going to go into because it's such a very dramatic revelation, but the show itself isn't necessarily too concerned about, story beats or character progression. I mean, sure, you get a little bit of character progression towards the back half of the season, but the whole idea, the whole conceit, is that through the process of learning all of these different philosophies from different multiverses, Clancy and as well as the audience learns a bit about themselves. It's through this podcast and whatnot that Clancy kind of learns a bit more about himself and about other people and how he should incorporate some of this stuff into his life. But there's a lot of room for interpretation on various bits in this show, and I'm not going to go through them because there would be spoilers, and I don't have the time to rip videos from Netflix because I got other projects I'm working on. But rest assured, this show is going to be talked about for a long time. And I really do hope that there is a second season, because it would be interesting to really delve deeper into this world. the different ideas that could be discussed, especially from where the final episode ends. It would be interesting to see what kind of philosophies could be brought up in the situation that happens in the end of the season. But as of right now, there hasn't been any sort of plans for a second season, according to Netflix. So who knows? Maybe we will get a second episode or a second season. Maybe not. But rest assured, I do think Midnight Gospel is one of those shows that is going to be looked at from many people's perspectives, and they're going to really enjoy it. Not everyone's going to enjoy it, of course, because, it's kind of, I will say there's not much really to grasp on except for the podcast sections and some of the stuff that happens outside of it. And it's just really good. The animation, though, can it'll probably teeter some people off, but I actually really enjoyed the animation, and at times it's very trippy, very existential at times. It's very beautiful to look at. It's very well written. It's very well put together, and you just don't see shows like this. You don't see shows where they just lift podcast episodes and place them inside of a show. You don't really see that much. I mean, unless you're on YouTube and they animate certain sections of a podcast. I know that happens sometimes from different creators, like the JRE podcast, but that's a whole different story. So what am I going to give the Midnight Gospel? Well, I'm going to give the Midnight Gospel a solid recommendation and an A-. Very well done, very well put together. I'm excited to see what happens next with this franchise, with this whole opportunity. I would love to see more of it. And if there isn't, then I guess we had a pretty good run. It was a very well put together show with tons of topical things. And I do believe that this is a show that is needed right now because it deals with certain things like meditation and, grief and so many other different topics that are needed to process the stuff that we're going through at this time. So that's all I gotta say. Hope you guys have a very fantastic day, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.